Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/ytaxp and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
I gotta add that song to my Spotify playlist. It's going on there. Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the only ACA show where you have to ask us to clarify which one we mean when we say CBT. I'm Puck, and my co-host tonight is Canada's version of Justin Bieber, Nate Smith.
One more. Okay. Fun fact: I was actually born in the same hospital as Justin Bieber.
Oh,
Separated by an undisclosed amount of years. But yes.
And we're joined tonight by the host of Transition Stories YouTube channel. Welcome, Phoebe J. Rose.
Thank you, Puck. Hello.
Hi.
Good to have you on, Phoebe.
Well, yes. So as Puck says, I run a YouTube channel called Transition Stories where I interview non-cisgendered people about gender identity, and what it means to them. And I've been doing it about 6 months now, and I've had some wonderful guests on there. I'd say Puck has been on the show himself, even though it was a bit of a stretch to get Puck on there, because Puck was going, well, do I qualify for your show? I said, are you a cis person? No. You'll be fine then. And that was a very interesting interview that was done. I say, I've got interviews coming up until the end of the year and stretching into next year, and I have learned more about different types of gender than I ever thought that I would by doing the show that I do.
That's cool. That's cool. And sadly, as a filthy cis person, I shall not be on your show, but I can still be an ally. And do you remember how it was that we met and started talking about getting you on the show?
Vaguely remember.
I remember because we were watching Arden Hart make a Pikachu out of clay.
That's right.
On her Twitch, yeah. And then we started chatting, and he said, you know, I'd love to be on SecX. And I'm like, well, we'd love to have you. And Puck is all for it too. So tonight, folks, shyness is nice, but shyness can stop you from saying all the things in life you'd like to. And if you get that reference, you probably drink craft beer. Also, if there's something you'd like to say, if there's a story you'd like to share, please give us a call at 512-991-9242 or at tiny.cc/callsex. The show is coming right now.
I love this part of the show, the part of the show where we can talk about something that's come up this week, maybe that's turning you on a little bit. Let's go all the way with our special guest, Phoebe. What is turning you on this week?
Well, my fiance sent me something, a nice picture, and it is one of the weirdest corporate crossovers that I've seen in a very long time. So the KY Lubrication Company have teamed up with the Krispy Kreme Donut Company, and you can now purchase donut glazed flavored ring lube.
Okay.
Is it flavored?
Donut glazed flavor.
Wow.
There's a joke here about glazed Timbits somewhere, but I can't quite put it together.
So when I saw it, I thought that it was one of those things that was a spoof. And then I realized that it wasn't a spoof, because she then sent me a video of her picking it up in the store and going, this is for real.
I will keep that in mind.
Wow. It's amazing what you can buy down at your local CVS pharmacy.
That is pretty. Hey, wait, you read a bit of the description during the pre-show. Can you read it for our audience? I think they want to hear it.
So I shall just give me 1 second just to pull it up. It reads, Rather wonderfully, it does. So it is KY whole glaze, warm and sticky, glazed donut flavor, warming personal lubricant.
Wow.
So yes, the Krispy Kreme company have decided that warming personal lubricant is their new donut glaze. And the question is, what are they doing with those donuts now?
I guess I never would have thought of describing a lube as sticky. That's just me.
Warm and sticky.
Warm and sticky. Anyway,
Yeah,
Nate, what's turning you on this week?
You had me at warm, but you lost me at sticky.
I thought the and would have lost some people.
Well, what's turning me on this week is a framework that was published by the International Olympic Committee last week on, let's see, the fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination based on the basis of gender identity and sex variation. So this is like a 2-year project into how to make a safe and welcoming environment for those who participate in sports at the elite level. It's got a bunch of principles and guidelines for them to go. Basically, the different Olympic sports are going to have their own purview as to how they qualify different candidates based on traits and whatnot. But yeah, and then they've set out some principles for, sort of the general ethics and the general attitudes that they want to put forward. So this feels to me like a step forward for non-cis athletes. And I would like to thank Miss Stephanie Helms, another member of the SecX family, for throwing this at me.
See, that's cool. Like after something serious like that, I'm kind of embarrassed about what's turning me on this week. Because what's turning me on this week is the music and discography of Britney Spears. She has a catalog that goes back 20 years, right at the heart of the bubblegum pop movement of the late 90s. Like whenever I think back on the significant moments of my life, I can hear a Britney Spears song there. She's been in the news lately, so you can check that out if you'd like. But it's given me pause, and it's giving me a chance to look back and really listen back at the days when albums were meant to be listened to from beginning to end, and none of this singles nonsense. So that's I've been listening back, and it's bringing back a lot of good memories for me. I talked a couple weeks ago about oral sex involving hearing and music and sounds, and I'd be lying if I said that Britney Spears music did not feature in a few key scenes for me. So.
Britney Spears has some great fucking songs, and when I
does.
say that, I mean the verb, not the adjective, right? So
Yes,
I think that plays because what she's gone through for the past, like 10 years or something like that, 10, 12 years under this conservatorship has been absolutely inhuman, unfair. Like they controlled her ability to reproduce and have a baby. They forced her to work against her will. It's mind-blowing to know what a celebrity, a famous person has had to go through behind the scenes because they're famous, right? Like she kind of cracked, and then they put the conservatorship on her, and then subject her to even worse conditions that like any normal person would have a serious tough time dealing with. So I am so stoked that this person is free of those chains.
well, we're like turning this into a nonprofits episode, but it isn't Sunday, so we got to kind of
Okay.
wheel this back. No, my favorite Britney Spears song is the one with a title that I probably am not allowed to say out loud. And if you guys can figure out what that is, leave it in the comments or leave it in chat. Let's see if you guys can figure out which Britney song you should never say the name of.
But what I will say is that there is a
Go ahead, Phoebe.
Britney Spears song. There is a Britney Spears song that comes to mind that describes her conservatorship, and it is toxic, very, very toxic.
Well, before we fully derail into a nonprofits episode, though, we're here to talk about you, Phoebe. We're here to talk about you and your wonderful channel of telling stories. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel?
So I am a binary trans woman, and for those of you who don't know what a binary trans woman is, I identify as a female. I don't identify as male. I don't identify as any non-binary gender. I exclusively identify as female, and I was assigned male at birth. And I began my first transition when I was about 15 in 2004. So now I'm showing you how old I am. And then I detransitioned just before I went off to university. And then I very nearly got married. And then when that fell apart, I then decided to retransition at the age of 20. So it has been over 11 years that I have been living as Phoebe Rose. And it feels very weird for me to say that because I'm coming up to where I've lived more of my life as Phoebe than I did the person before. And when I look back at that, I go, if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't be A, the person I am today, and B, would I actually be here today? And that's not a sad thing to say, it's a realism thing to say, because I view the act of me transitioning as the one thing that kept me on this planet, because rates of suicide amongst trans people are very high, and I was one of those people that did have some very dark times and very dark thoughts. And I've been through a lot of things. For a period when I was at law school, I did what was known as going stealth, so no one knew that I was trans, and that was one of the most difficult periods of my life because I had to bury and I had to hide a part of me. I had to suppress who I was for a period of it. And it was one of those things that was always at the back of my head going, well, what if this gets out? What if they find out? What if I get this, that, and the other? And 2015 UK was not a very welcoming place for trans people, especially when you're in the City of London. And for those of you who know the City of London, it's a very conservative, very corporate world. And it scared me sometimes. And it always made me slightly paranoid about, well, what do I do? How do I interact with people? Am I being clocked by somebody? And these little cues that you as a trans person, and if you are a trans person watching, may be able to identify and sympathize with me that, well, have they noticed this about me? Have they noticed this about me? Am I presenting as passing enough? And I've definitely now moved away from that because it was very toxic for my own mental health doing that. And I appeared on a show that is run by one of the hosts of the non-profits, Neil, 604 Atheist. And I went, that's a bloody good format you've got there. I had a word with him. And I said, do you mind if I rip off your format? And he went, yeah, sure, that's fine. Just don't do it on the same subject. I was like, yeah, all right. So I went on his show, and then I started my very first interview with a wonderful medical student, army friend of mine named Student Dr. Ben in July, and it's gone from there. And I love the interviews that I do. I keep being told by everyone that I interview that I'm quite good at it. I'm pretty sure Puck will say that I'm fairly good at it, or else he wouldn't have wanted me to come and talk more about it. I say I had a former host of this very show on as my last guest. One Vila Bianca was on, and I try to find a diverse range of people to come on. I don't want people who just look like me to talk to me about what it's like to be me, because I won't learn anything and it's stale otherwise. And one of the things that I have found doing the show is that I've learned more about gender and more about myself than I have ever dreamed of learning. And it's only by listening to the stories of others that I've actually been able to understand where other people come from. Because as a binary trans woman, it can be very difficult for me to empathize and understand, because I just don't understand what not being a binary trans woman is like. Just like I will never understand what being a cis person is like. I'll never get it.
Yeah.
And I sit
feel
there
you.
and I and I sit there with some of the interviews, and I can get very emotional with some of the interviews because I'm learning a lot and I'm hearing stories. I say I did an interview with an older trans woman who lives in rural Minnesota in a town of 900 people. And that was a wonderfully eye-opening interview. And the more interviews I do, the more I learn about myself. And I hope that I can help educate the people who tune in to watch me on a Saturday or a Sunday when I have my show about trans people and non-cisgender people, because they don't all look like me, white binary trans women, or they don't all look like the opposite of me, white
it's funny
binary
that
trans men.
It's funny that you mentioned Neil, because one of the things that I learned from consuming his content is that sure, we might all fall under the umbrella of atheist, but there's so much else about us. We're so different, so many different ways that we have come to atheism, so many different journeys along the way that have brought us here. And I suppose I hadn't put enough thought into the fact that trans people must be the same way. There is no one, like you said, there's no one cookie cutter trans person. There's so many different stories and so many different kinds. And I would guess that you're learning something new with every interview that you do.
I learned so much from your interview, for example. When you came on the show, I learned an awful lot, because when you said in the interview, after I asked you the question, so what does gender mean to you? And you went, well, what the bloody hell's gender? What is it? It stopped me, because I've always had a sense of internal gender. I've always had this sense that I feel some form of gender. And for someone to turn around to me and go, well, bloody hell's that? Sod that. I don't really give a monkeys. It threw me, and I was like, well, okay then. And it made me definitely made me think. Definitely made me think. It definitely made me go, hang on a minute. Stop looking just through your own little worldview of you being a binary trans woman. Stop doing that.
Well, before this turns into my story, G'nay, take this.
So I didn't know that you were sort of borrowing from Neil's concept, but now that you mention it, now that you think of it, there is a lot of overlap with, transitioning from being the gender that you feel inside to the gender that you feel outside, and then also transitioning from a religious point of view to a non-religious point of view. There is a lot of overlap with that show. That's pretty cool. I actually got to meet Neil a couple of months ago. I don't know if you knew that, Phoebe. But yeah,
you are both Canadians. It must be one of these things, because Canada is this enormous country,
right,
that has nobody living there. There are some people living there. You're living there, obviously, but it has a population density of like nothing.
Oh yeah,
you kind of congregate around the US border and around the coasts.
Pretty much.
Or where there's water, Canadians have congregated. So it's like you've got Ontario and Toronto, which has people, which is not far from Lake Michigan. And then you have people that live out in Vancouver. And then some people live on the Atlantic coast, but not many. And then
a certain someone who possesses a mental vagina, I believe, lives out on the East Coast. But we're not acquainted at this time. But fortunately, Neil does live close enough to me that I was able to go say hello.
Is it a mental vagina, or is it more of a spiritual vagina that is being possessed?
Well, I feel like if a spirit, by definition, is disembodied, then whatever you feel in your mind would be your spiritual genitalia, right? Wouldn't you think?
One would hope so. I say, for those of you who are wondering what on earth Nate and I are on about, there was a meme that was floating around the internet, the Twitterverse, as we say, that said that, and this came from the anti-trans section of Twitter, that said, specifically to trans women who have had lower SRS, GRS, like myself, that I could not be, quote, real as a woman because I have to word this quite carefully.
It is Thursday, so you don't have to mince words.
Well, basically, I've had a reconstituted penis was the aim of what they were saying. And that's not a real vagina. That's just an imitation vagina. That's not a spiritual vagina. That's not a mental vagina. That's just, that's still a penis. It just looks different.
It's funny how these people that want to appeal to biology seem to be completely unaware that the same cluster of cells that forms the clitoris also forms the penis, and it's just an influx of hormones at a certain time that makes a male a male. Like, we're literally the same before that point. Like, you want to argue biology, maybe learn some fucking biology, guys. Like,
So that reminds me of one of the interviews that I did with student Dr. Ben. He's a medical student, and he was schooling me on, well, basically when a trans man or a trans masc person starts to take testosterone, there will be some engorgement and some enlargement of the clitoris. And one of the procedures, which is a metoidoplasty, is extending the clitoris and converting that into a penis. And that is one of the things that fascinates me about what medical science can do and how these medical science deniers, so to speak, just can't get it into their head that medical science can do wonderful things. If you'd said 100 years ago that you could take a heart from somebody and put that into somebody else and that heart would keep working, they would have laughed at you like you were crazy. And it kind of feels the same with some of the arguments that you get, because I had somebody say, but it can't be a real vagina that you've got. It can't be a real set of genitalia that you've got. You must have problems with it. And I turn around and say, well, I may still have my prostate, but it is wonderful to stimulate. I have retained all of the lubricating glands that I had when I still had it looking like a floppy thing with some bollocks hanging below it. And it works. It is a functioning urination machine and sex machine, and it is one of the greatest 550,000 baht that I ever spent in my life.
oh my. It's like you keep saying this word vagina. I do not know that. I do not think you know what it means.
A vagina. What is this vagina that you talk of? I see this person has vagina. You claim to have vagina, but you see man in Thailand who create vagina for you. Is this still vagina?
Wow. Puck can't even do the interview anymore.
I know. I'm
he's
losing my
lost.
composure from giggling here. This is why you end up on every promo every week, because you're and then
Right?
to anybody also who is looking at Phoebe and listening to this us talking about her channel, she has such a way of putting people at ease and doing a little bit of research and knowing the good questions to really make you think about yourself. Because going on that show and having to think about some of the stuff that was posed to me, she says I made her think. She made me think just as much. So you can see just by the way she is now, just how comfortable she's making us, and how she has a nice way of making everybody at ease. But don't take our word for it. Phoebe, what other success stories do you have? Like maybe a couple of key interviews of. I'm thinking, were there people who don't really interact much with the atheist community or online community that you've been able to talk to and maybe help bring out a little bit?
As I say, my show is not deterministic based on your religious affiliation. And I say I'm currently in discussions with a trans woman who is an ordained pastor in Georgia, who I am hoping to get on at around about the end of this month, beginning of next month. If you are a religious person, it doesn't matter to me, because I think one of the biggest disservices that is done by religion is that it can be very exclusionary to those who do not fit gender norms or have gender variations. And as somebody who used to be a religiously Jewish person, who was a convert to Judaism, I had to select my branch of Judaism very carefully, because some branches of Judaism would have rejected me purely and simply because I am a trans woman. And I try to get perspectives of people who aren't always like me, who don't just think like me, who don't look like me, who don't sound like me. And I try my best to break down the barriers, because at the end of the day, my main goal is to ensure that not only am I learning, but that I'm putting stories out there that may not be going out in anywhere else. So I say one of my interviews that I've got coming up is a very good friend of mine who lives in New Zealand, and we're going to be talking about living with HIV as a trans person. And that's going to be the theme of the interview. And he's a trans man and he's HIV positive, and he's given me permission to share that. But that's going to be what we're talking about. How having HIV as a trans person is different, and how the system works and how it manifests. So I'm trying desperately hard to try to get as many different viewpoints as I can. But what I will say is one of my favorite interviews that I did is with someone called Amy Newman, because she was just as at ease as I can be. And she, at one point towards the end of the interview, I said, "So have you got anything that you'd like to say?" And she said, "Well, actually, yes. I'd like to talk about my penis." I went, "Oh, okay then. So the floor is yours." And she went, "Well, the first time I had a threesome and I looked at the guy's penis, I realized it didn't look like mine." And she then proceeded to describe the anatomy of her penis, that it doesn't urinate in the way that you would expect it to. And she described in quite intimate details the anatomy of her penis at the end of my show, at the end of my interview with her, which was something completely unexpected, but it was just one of those moments. It just felt right. And it was like, yeah, okay. Because not only do I try to get people who are trans on my show, but if you have another intersecting, such as if you're intersex as well, because Amy said that she was intersex as well, and we brought that up in the interview, and that's how she brought up the portion regarding the differences in the anatomical development of her penis. And that made me think as well, because I had never encountered somebody quite as open with their descriptions of their own genitalia. And I'm just trying my absolute damnedest to make sure that the stories are out there and that the stories can be heard, because I've got a story and lots of people who look like me have put their stories out there. And lots of people who look completely opposite to me have put their stories out there. But there's this whole section in the middle that I want to try to give a voice to. And I hope that with my show that I'm able to do that. And it's not just about trans people, despite the name. If you identify as a non-cisgendered person, I'm happy to interview you. I'm happy to give you the microphone. I'm happy to sit down and have a chat with you.
What if I'm just a really cool cis person? How about that?
I
No?
might develop some bizarre side allies
Okay.
thing just to
Keep me
get
posted.
awesome people like yourself on, Nate.
Well, just
I'm
finally
kidding,
in this
I'm kidding.
first segment, telling personal stories has to be really uncomfortable for some people. And obviously, if a person wants to keep something personal, it's their choice to do so. But what can we do to make people feel more comfortable in sharing with us?
Do not push the person. They will share what they are comfortable sharing with you. But also don't treat people like a Google or an encyclopedia or a 101. When you're asking a question to somebody, ask yourself this. Would I be comfortable if the person I'm about to ask this question to asked me the same question? So don't walk up to somebody and go, "Well, I've heard you're a trans person and I've heard you've been to Thailand. Could you please let me know what genitalia you've now got in your trousers?" Would you, as a person, feel comfortable if somebody walked up to you and went, "Hello, I hear you went abroad. Could you tell me, do you still have the same genitalia that you went out there with that you've got now?"
Oh yeah, totally. And I feel like that is true of really anyone. Like you don't go up to a woman and be like, "Oh, what size bra do you wear?" You don't go up to a man and be like, "Are you like a 5.5 incher or a 7.5 incher?" I'm just
grower or
curious.
shower?
Because I see the gray sweatpants and I'm thinking you're maybe like that's just not something anyone should do ever. Regardless of how a person identifies. But this is a call-in show, you may have heard, and we do have some calls on the line, so I think we should talk to some folks. Phoebe, are you ready to talk to some folks?
I'd love to. Never done this before, so here we go.
Lovely. And I'm just going to assume Puck is ready because he's a seasoned veteran. So on the line, we have Chelsea. Pronouns are she, her. And Chelsea wants to talk about some trouble that she is having with her mom. Chelsea, what's on your mind? You're live.
I'm live.
You are alive.
I'm alive. Ooh. Anyway. Yeah, I'm having trouble with my mom. It's never mind. I should probably turn off this YouTube thing. I have it on mute, but yeah, I'm gonna exit out for right now so I can talk to y'all without tracking. Yeah, my mom, so let me give you the rundown of I'm trans. I'm also at the same time, I've been trans for obviously all my life, but transitioning wise for about 3 years. And throughout those 3 years, my mom has struggled to, how do I put this? She's been on the fence. It's like she's both on and off on being helpful with pronouns and stuff, like getting it right and stuff. It's hit and miss. But at the same time, I'm also going goth, which is a recent thing that I'm doing. And one time, which would be like a week or two ago, I went into her office to do something, like drop off something or something. And she noticed that I was wearing black lipstick and obviously my goth attire.
Mm-hmm.
And she just startled. And then she said, I don't like that. I kind of laughed inside at that because I figured she would say something like that. But I shrugged that off. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I thought you were finished, but no, please continue.
No. Okay. Yeah, I'm not finished for sure.
I'm sure there's a lot more. Go ahead. You're listening.
Okay. Essentially, since it was her half work day where she's works by herself that day and doesn't have any customers coming in, she's always backed up and all that, and she uses Friday as her day to get shit done, even though it never seems to happen. She's always swamped. Which I do feel for her on that. But somehow we had a conversation, and I'm not sure if it was productive or not. I'm not entirely sure because when she says that, I just don't know who you are anymore. That I'm not sure. I don't even know what to think about that. I'm just being me.
And this is, only speaking from my personal experience. There is a subset of parents out there who have this idea not just of what their kids are, but what kind of life their kids will have and will continue to have, because that's part of their dream too. Some people would call this grandparent syndrome, where parents of grown kids will ask them, when are you going to give us grandkids, or something like that. They have this image in their mind of what they want, and by extension who their kids are and what kind of and it personally just makes me wonder, is it because they grew up in this system and they felt either fine about it or felt that this was something you're just supposed to do? Now this ties greatly into telling stories, because we hear the stories of other people and we see other ways that we can live our lives, and you hear someone going through something and say, hey, I actually resonate with that, let me learn a little bit more about it. So to us, there's a big, huge, wide world of options, whereas to our parents there may not have been. I don't know if there's any meaningful personal advice there, other than the idea that this might be really shocking to some parents who have this image in their mind, not just of what you were like when you were, a kid and living with them, but also what their relationship with you would be like when you're an adult?
Let me just jump in and say, shoot, I just stopped it. That's what I was about to say.
What do you guys got, Phoebe?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hear what you're saying, Chelsea, and I have a very similar situation with my own mother when I was coming out. And as I said, I came out for the second time in 2010. And my mother was more shocked, I would say, the second time, because in her words, she said, I thought this was not something that you were going to do. I thought this was over because, as I said, I transitioned, detransitioned, and then retransitioned. And it took a very long time for my mother and I to re-establish what I would consider to be the wonderful relationship that we do have now. But I have a question that I'd like to ask you, if this is okay. When you were pre-transition, what was the relationship that you have with your mother like?
I never really trusted her. I went to my dad mostly, and even my dad didn't support my transition because, religious reasons.
So my next question would be, what kind of relationship are you looking for with your mother? Are you after a relationship where your mother accepts you? Or are you after a relationship which is more mother-daughter, where you bond together? Or are you after a relationship where your mother may not necessarily agree, but accepts you as who you are? What kind of relationship are you after with your mother?
Mostly the latter, but also a little bit of the other two, if it can go that way.
Because
preferably, because I don't. The reason I say the latter is because I don't think she'll ever like what I'm doing, because she's in the religious mindset, and I can't force her to as I can't force anyone to think differently. They have to do that themselves.
As I say, with my mother, can I?
Sorry. Go ahead. Sure.
So I would say with my own mother, it took a very long time, and we went through a very negative phase together, and it was a very toxic relationship at points. And I did, for a period, not have contact with my mother because I knew that I needed the space from my mother, and I knew that I needed to almost reset the relationship I have with my mother. I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to be applicable in your situation. You have to understand the approach which is most safe and healthy for yourself. But I had to reset the relationship with my mother, and I had to find out not necessarily that it was something that I could impose upon my mother. I had to understand her positioning as well. And there was a book that I read that significantly helped me, and it helped my mother as well, that was written by Amy Ellis Nutt, and it is about the actress Nicole Maines and how she transitioned, and how her father, who was a very political individual, changed and developed and accepted his daughter instead of what his previous religious and political positions were. And it made me also think, how can I best approach this? I need to have a gradual approach because I want a relationship with my mother. And I had to sit down and I had to work out what kind of relationship I wanted with my mother. I'm very, very fortunate now that I have a loving relationship and a very mother-daughter relationship with my mother. I can't guarantee that you will have that kind of relationship, but you have to set the boundaries in your own relationship. And if your mother isn't necessarily ready to walk with you down the path, it may be that you need to stop on the path with her and engage with her and ask her maybe why have you stopped here? What are the hang-ups that you're having? What is preventing you from engaging with me? And how can I help you? Because whilst transition for me and for a lot of people that I've spoken to is a deeply personal journey, if you want to bring family members along with you on that journey, you've got to help them into the train that is your journey. And they may not want to sit in the class of train carriage that you've put them in, but you have to explain, okay, we're no longer on an intercity train going from London to Birmingham. We're going on a local train from Brighton to Hastings. And you have to explain why you're doing these things. And you have to understand that it's going to be difficult, because it is going to be an incredible change, because they will have perceived you as their child in a certain way, and you will have perceived them as a parent in a certain way, and you're fundamentally coming along and going, actually, what I have been presenting to you for so many years and what you have thought about me for so many years isn't actually how I want to continue. And you have to understand that whilst it's a very difficult journey for yourself, that it may very well be a very difficult journey for the family members that you want to bring along. And unfortunately, some family members may not want to come along on that journey. But some family members may not be ready yet to come along on that journey. And some family members may just go, oh, okay, well, I'll sit wherever you tell me to sit in the train. And at the end of the day, you have to do it in a way that is healthy for you. And I found that I, on reflection, was a very selfish individual with my own transition. And I didn't understand the positions of my family that I was trying to bring along and trying to tell them where to sit on the train. And if I could go back and do it again, I'd be a lot gentler with some of the things that I did. But equally, they needed to be gentler with me with some of the things they did, because one of the worst moments that I ever had was when my mother referred to me as having, quote, murdered her son, which will always stick with me as one of the most devastating things. And I had to understand where she was coming from with that if I wanted a relationship with my mother. And I hope that you can help develop the relationship you want with your mother and potentially with other family members. And I hope that what I have said can help you understand that whilst transition is a deeply personal, deeply identity-driven and validating thing that you're doing, it may be very challenging for the people that you're trying to bring along on that journey with you, be they friends, be they family, be they partners in your life.
That was well put, but I do have a question for you, Phoebe.
Yep.
Shoot, and I just lost it.
Well, I did want to say, like, I absolutely commend you for the courage that it takes to, like, learn to establish your own identity and your own style, and to go forward with it, and to, like, actually take the time to figure this out for yourself. A lot of people that I've met have not even gone through that kind of introspection. So it's wonderful to hear that you're doing this for yourself and going on this journey. So props to you for that.
Chelsea, did you think of your
mean
question?
Did it
come back
it was
to you?
something about. I kind of thought about it like towards the tail end of what she was saying, but just kind of lost it.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because at the beginning of the call, you said that that your mother's pronoun usage is kind of hit and miss. Do you ever get the impression that it's been like weaponized? Like when she's mad at you, she gets it wrong, and when you guys are getting along, she gets it right. Do you get that impression, or is it just random, sort of all over the place? Because I think someone's motive is important. You know, intent is important, especially when it comes to using someone's preferred pronouns, and that might help maybe give you an insight as to, you know, where she's coming from.
Good question. I don't know for sure about this, but like my brother is a huge bigot, and I've already cut ties with him. Our relationship was so unhealthy and one-sided. It was all about him and what he wanted and his religiosity. You probably know I'm going with that.
Oh yeah, I think we've all got a narcissistic jerk that we had to cut off in our lives at some point. Not saying your brother is that.
But yeah, to the point of your question, he has a daughter, and I do see his daughter sometimes when he drops him off at my mom's place. Okay. And when my mom invites me over to see his daughter, my mom doesn't use any pronouns, or either she does that or she just always says he. Actually, she always says he, which is not my preferred pronouns. Not my pronouns.
Well, I think that ought to tell you something, and I think what Phoebe said should definitely dovetail into that as well. But we do need to move on, Chelsea. But if you would like to continue this conversation, you can join us in the Atheist Community of Discord after show, and we'd love to talk to you there. But thank you very much for your call, and I think we are going to move on to a little something that I shall let Puck introduce.
We do, and we've been plugging other shows for a little while here. We talked about nonprofits. We talked about Truth Wanted. And if you'd like to know what we do on those other shows, here's a little clip to show you.
Oh, every time I see myself in one of those recaps, I just imagine just how proud my mother must be of me and all of the things that I've accomplished in my storied career.
It's funny because the religion spiritual thing butts heads, but they're the ones telling each other that your position makes no sense and is unfounded, and I'm just sitting there just like eating popcorn.
I have to say this because it's in my Chicago contract. Green Bay, Green Bay, Green Bay.
Let's move on. We've got we're gonna do a quickie with Lloyd and Kenneth and Rick.
I'm not sure I signed up for that either. But...
like if I were to say that the Catholic Church is like an international criminal cartel that protects pedophiles, would that be an example of like a thing that would be like offensive to the Catholic Church?
I love this one.
Green Bay.
One sweet day. I will make that promo. Nate, you're on the promo like every week. I think there's this running thing where you were on promos for like 2 months straight. It was.
You've
beautiful.
made the promo, Puck.
I make the. I'm like off to the side. It's like a facial reaction of the promo. I want to actually one of these days be worthy of having. It's you. It's always you. Like I have an episode of Truth Wanted tomorrow. You're not on it, but somehow you're going to be in the promo for Truth Wanted next week. I'm sure.
You know what, Mister? I've had it up to here with your jealousy. Okay, you have been on precisely 5 times. Okay, I counted how many times everybody's been on, and I'll give you one guess as to who's been on the most.
Oh no! Well, it's Johnny, but no. Maybe I'm like 4th or something. I'll take it.
No, it's not Johnny. I'll give you a hint. His last name rhymes with Thrillahunty.
Okay. That's perfect sense to me. But yes, absolutely check out our other shows, Truth Wanted and Nonprofits. Those are my favorite shows to work with, Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. But back to here and back to you, Phoebe. So I wanted to talk about the specific benefits.
I would just like to say that
What's that?
Every time after I see one of those segments, I do just have to say vagina.
Vagina.
We're going to get nowhere. That's cool. Okay, so I want to talk about the specific benefits of having stories like this available to the public, right? So what do you think are some of these benefits that people can get from, maybe if they can't be there live or they're not giving their story, what can they get out of listening to these stories?
The number one thing that I hope to aim to get with running my interview show is that I want to have a diverse range of individuals who are represented, because the last thing that I want is to hear the same people talking about the same issues over and over and over again. And it's particularly in the UK, the anti-trans side are very good at getting their people into all of the media and going on the I've been cancelled media tour and the I've been cancelled court case and the I've been cancelled interview on television show. And I saw this and it frustrated me because it wasn't a reflection of reality. And I wanted to give a platform to people so that they could say, well, hang on a minute, I'm a human being at the end of the day, and I have a story, and it's completely different to the human being that you may have seen on certain television channels, or you may have heard about bringing a certain court case, or you may have seen promoting a certain book. And I wanted to give a voice to other people, because the number one thing that I heard from some people is, I don't see people like me talking about the issues that affect me as a non-cisgendered person. And to show that to the general public and to show that non-cisgender people don't all look like me, they're not all white, binary, trans women, or they're not the polar opposite of me, white, binary, trans men, and that there are shades of grey. And non-white people also transition, and white people also transition, and you can be binary and you can be non-binary, or you can take the approach that Puck took and turn around and stuck two fingers up at gender and went, what the heck do I do with gender?
So yeah, that's what I think is one of the most important things, is that there are some people who they don't know someone in their life who is trans, and they don't have an idea of what that perspective is like. So I think that's wonderful that these stories are there, because at least they can get to hear some of that perspective of people who are telling stories that they probably wouldn't get to hear any other place in their life.
Yeah, I met the first trans person I met was a woman named Julianne. It was one of my first jobs. I couldn't have been maybe more than 16, and I was working in a call center, and they were so lonely that she told me her entire story one night over a coffee after work, because we were actually doing supervisor training, and then just went for a coffee after, and she was so just happy to have somebody who didn't hate her for no reason. And that's always stuck with me, years and years and years later, that like, it's just, people just want to be accepted for who they are. And so I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, Phoebe.
Thank you.
So telling stories does run some risk of delving into subjects and topics that may be triggering for some. So what's the best advice that you would have for people who may be triggered but would still find your content useful or entertaining?
Understand that you, as a viewer of the show, are in control of the show. Nobody is requiring you to watch my show. And if something is difficult or challenging for you, hit the pause button. And if you want to continue watching it, then press the play button again. It's not a requirement that if something is difficult, you have to plow all the way through to the end. But if something has caught you by surprise or caught you off guard, I will always say that there are support groups out there. And if something is particularly getting to you, there are support groups who have helplines in the UK, in the US, and in Canada. I know there are a number of organizations. But I would say be kind to yourself. If something is upsetting you in one of the interviews that I'm giving, take a step back, be kind to yourself. I generally try to introduce the topic of questioning where I'm going to be going in my interview. So if I'm going to be talking about certain issues which may be of a sexual nature, we're going to start moving on to a slightly different topic, and I will gradually build up the segments within. And I personally, when I'm running an interview, try to scout for the audience and the person that I'm interviewing where the interview is going to head. But I understand that someone may not see that. They may come in at different points. But if you are triggered by something in one of the interviews, don't allow it to be you alone if you're comfortable reaching out to somebody who may be a friend, who may be a professional, or who may be a stranger at the end of a helpline. Don't allow it to eat yourself up. Don't allow it to consume you until it becomes too much. If you're not ready to discuss that issue and you just need some space and some time to yourself, that's fine as well. But don't allow it to become the central portion of who and what you're becoming, and be kind to yourself.
Solid advice.
All right. Well, we have actually an unusual amount of phone calls this week, so I want to see.
Now we hit the blower one more time.
So we'll get on the old blower. Get your laughing gear around these calls. We'll have a good old chin wag with these calls, and we'll see what the old dog says.
This entire episode.
Let's have a conflab. We've got some folks on the phone. I apologize to the United Kingdom for my British accent, just so you know.
I'll take it, because we're going to get our laughing gear around these callers that are on the dog, and we'll have a good old chin wag, and we'll see what they got to say to us all.
Yes, let's do, shall we? Okay. So, okay, this serious show, very serious show. Okay, our caller. Oh, look, we have a fellow snow bro calling in from Canada. Cumulative pronouns are he, him. He's got a story to tell us and something about non-consensual content in games and anime. Cumulative, you are live on SecX. Hi.
I'm glad to be here. So yeah, I just got done playing a game today that I was expecting some kind of gay panic scene to be in, because like a previous series that the writers had worked on practically had a tradition of they would introduce a new character, usually an older male, and they would turn out to be gay very early on, and immediately as soon as that reveal is made, they would start being predatory, and they'd show themselves to either be predatory or villainous. And I was surprised that not only in this game that I finished recently was there not such a gay panic scene, they had a main character's development actually cover an LGBTQ topic in what seemed to be a respectful way. And I really can't tell whether it was good or bad, because there just aren't that many games that do this. And I'm kind of like, I don't know what to feel now, because I'm kind of afraid that, like the fridge girlfriend trope, do you think this is something that'll be normalized, or are we going to have to sort of brace ourselves emotionally for the predatory gay guy scene when we play video games or watch anime, and just be pleasantly surprised when it doesn't happen?
I think we're on the road to it being more normal. If you look at a lot of open world role-playing games, I know one of Puck's favorite games ever is Skyrim. Another favorite game, the Fallout series, has recently made it possible that you could marry or pair with someone of the same gender or someone of the opposite gender. And even though there was a little bit of, the 1 million moms being like, oh, think of the children, it really by and large just kind of went unnoticed, and like nobody really cared. It was just like, oh, I can be with Preston Manning from Fallout 4. Oh, okay, well that's great. Or Preston Garvey, So I think we're not Preston Manning. Yeah, you're Canadian, so you get that mistake. Yeah, Preston Manning is definitely not interested in dating men.
No, and I think of
reform.
Yes, exactly.
Then I think of other games too, that actually handle these topics really well. And I think the place where you're going to find these more instead of the big AAA games is look at the indie market, because these are the people who are using their voice to make these games that are smaller but no less excellent in quality. I could give a list of a few here that I'm thinking of, but as much as we see negative stereotypes in there, we also see a lot of positive representation. You pointed out one, and you probably don't have to think too hard to come up with a bunch of others. And part of what makes me wonder is like, these games are designed with a specific audience in mind, and dare I say maybe even culture. And I'm coming to realize just how American biased I am. And I'm failing to realize, like, Phoebe says a word like Bristol, and I have no idea what that means, or Brighton. I'm sure that's somewhere, but it's shocking to me that people from outside, you can say something like Yuma, Arizona, and they know where that is, right? So I need to work on my cultural and global awareness, and in doing so, I think of a lot of other games, like to name one specifically, the Dragon Age series, where you can actually romance a number of different characters regardless of your own gender. Right, and they don't make any deal about it. They don't assume that a character is any less able or capable just because they happen to prefer a certain kind of relationship or not. It's there, but they don't make a deal about it.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a kind of a side concern that I had about that same series, actually. I guess I might as well name them. The series that I played was called The Caligula Effect, and the series that the writers previously worked on is called Persona. And the Persona, like, it's a tradition for Persona. For if there's a gay guy, then he's a villain, and he's probably going to try and drag you off to a fade to black, screaming, kicking, and screaming. And that didn't happen in the Caligula Effect games. And those both kind of draw from a parent series called Shin Megami Tensei. And when you talked about like how familiar people are with American stuff, it kind of like, I played a lot of SMT, and it kind of bothered me after my third SMT game how it sort of depended on its players to be familiar with Japan, to know what a Roppongi is and what an Ikebukuro is, and how to get from one to the other without a map of Japan in front of you.
That all went over my head.
Yeah.
Phoebe, what do you have to say about this?
As I say, the very first game that I was introduced to, which had some form of relationships in it, was Grand Theft Auto 4, which also had the infamous hot coffee mod in it, which I don't know if you remember. That was where you could simulate sex. And when it was revealed, some of the games were upgraded from mature to adults only. And I'd say we have dramatically moved on from the days of Grand Theft Auto 4, where all of the relationships were heterosexual relationships, where the male character was having relationships with female characters. And we are now seeing a greater level of diversity in the games. As you've described, you're no longer seeing the gay panic scene. And I think that as society has moved on, the computer and video game industry is moving on as well. And this is seen
I hope so, yes.
When you have the lawsuit about the quote-unquote bro culture that was at a certain game developer being called out as no longer acceptable. And I think that culture is moving the video game industry as society moves. It's got to move with it. And unfortunately for them, it might be that they are being seen as relics of the past, and they've got to start to evolve and adapt with the culture and the market at the end of the day. Because if you're seen as a relic and you're trying to operate in a free market and you're holding on to these stereotypes that the market doesn't want, the market's going to eat you alive and you're not going to be around for much longer.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
For the people who are stuck in... For the devs out there who are stuck, entertainers and game devs and such who are stuck in the past there, I get, like, just from the perspective of a consumer, I get the impression that these people are scared that if they let more LGBTQ people or women or non-straight men into their development workplace, into their dev cycle, then the straight men won't be allowed to write like horny content, for instance. But like something that comes right to mind like right away is the Xenoblade series, because they put out a statement a while ago saying that their workforce is something like 25% women, and they've hired people from the porn industry even. And the games they have horny content. I would say they seem even more horny knowing this, that like not just men approved of the horny content in the game, you know?
There's no fear to worry about the horny content ever like hitting a stopping point. Okay, because for every
No.
game with good representation and good storytelling like Celeste, there's going to be another one like Honey Pop. Okay,
Yeah.
you know,
All
so
right.
there's no danger. There's always going to be content for people who are looking for that kind of content. And I think the place we're going to go, like I said, is not the big names yet. Because the bigger companies will take time for their cultures to change. But I think it's with the independents, with games that it's all about telling a story and it's all about being very character based. The other one that's coming to mind right now is Life is Strange. So they're out there and they're starting to become much more and more prominent. And I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see these, you see these in the news stories. Again, not to turn this into a nonprofits episode, but you hear stories about certain companies that are starting to realize this is a very toxic culture that we have within our organization and we need to take meaningful steps to change it. As that's happening, you're going to see it happen in the games too. I appreciate you bringing this up because it's like one of those places since video games are, ever since shutdown for a couple of years ago, video games are taking off, right? The video games are almost on par with movies as far as how much people spend on it for their entertainment. And these issues are going to start to become not like just for a niche group of people who happen to really like video games, but something that's going to affect a lot of people in the long run.
Yeah, the general public's gonna notice this stuff.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm glad you're on top of it and bringing it up. So thank you very much.
Before we let you go, I do want to point out.
As I learned from.
Yeah, I want to quickly point out, and then I'll give Phoebe the last word here. But Birdo was described in 1988, right, as a boy who likes to dress up as a girl. In the instruction booklet for Super Mario Bros. 2, nobody batted an eye. So, any pushback that you see against this is largely just the throes of a dying animal. It's like 1 million moms currently at 4,000 characters. It's not 1 million people. It's literally 4 conservative, bothersome pearl clutchers in friggin', wherever they live. I think we are moving in the right direction when it comes to that. But Phoebe, what did you have to say?
All right.
I know you.
So, I would say that the increasing of diversity of relationships and sexual expression and LGBT expression is not a threat to the more traditional heterosexual male culture being in video games. It's not going to be under threat from these. It's still going to be there because a large market is still going to enjoy that. It's not like we're saying eliminate all of this, that, and the other, and the Mary Whitehouses of these world and Auntie BBC coming along and saying let's have it in a very much sterilized way. It's not going to eliminate the culture of the heterosexual male having a heterosexual relationship just because you've all of a sudden got a homosexual relationship or someone is identifying as a bisexual character. It's not going to disappear because there's still a market for it out there, and the video games are still going to want to have that market buying its games.
Yeah, devs want to sell games, so absolutely. But Cumulative, we do have one more caller that we want to get to, but I want to give you the final word if you have anything to say in conclusion.
I guess if any Persona fans out there want to try a new game that's more LGBTQ positive, then I can wholeheartedly recommend the Caligula Effect too.
Nice. Well, I am, as you may know, quite the gamer. So Caligula Effect 2. You're in the atheist community of Discord too, aren't you?
Yes. Yes.
Nice. Well, if I forget, I might hit you up for the name of that game again. But thank you very much for calling. You have a great night, okay?
Thank you for having me on. Look forward to our next call.
Cool. All right. So we're going to try to squeeze this one in, eh, Puck?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Returning favorite and fellow SecX family member Stephanie is calling in. Pronouns are she, her. And I think Stephanie is going to give us some further insight into what I brought up earlier, which, to be fair, I only brought up because she told me about it. I didn't know. So I'm not going to lie and say that I'm, super woke and whatnot. Stephanie actually told me about this, and I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. That's definitely going to be the thing that I talk about. But for once, let's hear an actual female athlete talk about trans females in sports. What a novel idea. Stephanie, you're on the line.
Hey, how are you, Nate?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that you called in because I'm always interested to hear your perspective on this stuff. The report that came out, or what was it? A framework. I believe they called it a framework. Stephanie? Uh-oh.
Well, it's still the topic we're talking about, so while we're waiting, Nate, what more do you have about?
Yeah. There she is.
There, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Stephanie, we can hear you. Yes. Go.
Oh, good. I guess I was going over to read actually read a little bit from it, but I was pleasantly surprised. It was released on Tuesday, and it is a very strong statement from the IOC that trans people belong in sport. They ought to be able to compete in sport. The IOC itself doesn't control the policies of its member governing bodies of sport. For example, World Sailing is a governing body for my sport. But it basically is directing each one of its member organizations to take steps to assure that trans people fulfill the obligations of the IOC Charter, which says sport is a human right, and it calls for if there's going to be any exclusion from any particular competition, it has to be based on peer-reviewed evidence that a trans athlete has a particular advantage. And it's astonishing and quite nice to see, especially in light of the fact that in 23 American states, there is legislation either pending or passed that would exclude specifically trans girls from competing as girls and women. It's just a delightful thing. So I wonder if you all have any thoughts on trans folk in sport generally, or any questions about it.
As a trans sportswoman myself, who is someone who has very little care for her own health and safety on a Sunday afternoon when I'm playing in goal on a soccer field, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I have some personal knowledge of this report because my best friend, who is also a goalkeeper on the soccer field, is an IOC-funded researcher and is currently doing research into this very issue. And the number one takeaway from this is that, from what I can see in the report, is that sport is having to evolve as society evolves around it, and it cannot stay in the 1896 state that it was when it was first developed by the IOC at the original first Athens Olympics. And it makes me a very happy woman to know that what I do on a Sunday afternoon isn't going to be ripped away from me, and that what I do on a Sunday afternoon as a trans woman who has a footballing family, I'm not going to have that taken away from me. Even if FIFA were to turn around and say, well, you can't play soccer anymore, because FIFA are the governing body of association football. The English FA, just known as the FA, have said that I can compete. They have robust procedures in place for me to be able to compete. And it is lovely to see that the IOC has understood that trans people and those with differences in sexual development actually exist. And it is absolutely wonderful to be validated in that way and to see that I am recognized as an athlete. I am recognized as someone who gets onto the pitch and plays football, and I'm no different to the 10 other people on my team and the 11 people that I'm competing against. And it is just wonderful. And hopefully it will not all fall apart and this will all be some false hope. And hopefully this will be the beginning of the acceptance of particularly trans women in sport, but also some recognition that trans men actually exist and play sport, because there was an absurdity that in Texas, a trans man was required to compete in a wrestling competition against females who were not trans in any way and had been on testosterone treatment and was required to compete in the female category because that's what the law in Texas said. And it's crazy.
Which is like the opposite of what the anti-trans folks would have you believe, right? It's like, oh, these men, they just want to claim that they feel anyway, they want to claim that they feel like a woman so that they can go in and dominate women's sports. Like, no, that's not the case. Like you were saying, this guy just, he probably wanted to compete against other men, not women.
Yeah.
I don't know, Stephanie, did you read any of the comments to the Twitter announcement? Please tell me you didn't, because I did, and I was just like,
it was pretty bad.
It was.
My experience as a female athlete. I transitioned 23 years ago, and the first couple of years, people had a hard time wrapping their head around it. But I found that I have always been welcomed on the various crews that I've competed with. I am actually a U.S. sailing race officer. I've always worked wonderfully with race committees all around the country. Just ran a World Sailing Level 3 match racing competition down in Oakwood, Long Island, a couple of weekends ago with a great team. I've always been welcomed by my competitors, by race officials, and I find that all of the panic is not about the people playing. It's not amongst the people that are playing the games, but it's among people who have a notional view of what sports is like and what trans people are like. And I think that all of the government, most of the governing bodies around the world, and especially with this release from the IOC, have dealt with this problem for years and have worked out a way of handling the diversity of gender identities and sex variations over time, and it's getting better. It's great.
Because I say you mentioned,
regardless of the comments, regardless of comments in some Twitter feed.
Yeah, Twitter garbage bigots notwithstanding, things are getting better. Phoebe, what did you want to say?
As I say, what this report does do is it does make two governing bodies stand out as outliers, one of them being World Rugby and one of them being Sport England, because they now look as if they are the relics. They now look as if they are the dinosaurs. And I hope that this will move the likes of Ross Tucker away from their very intransigent positions towards trans people competing in certain sports and recognize that trans people are not a threat to the structure of the sports that they are trying to exclude trans people from. But following on from the mention on the Twitter comments, I had a look at the Twitter comments, and this probably tells something about how bad I have found the Twitter trans conversation. I didn't think the comments were actually as bad as they could have been. As someone who comes from what is colloquially known as Turf Island, I didn't think those comments were actually as bad as they could have been, and I was expecting and bracing for a lot worse in those comments.
Well, you're certainly being more charitable than I would be, so kudos to you for being the good Jedi and not the evil Jedi. But Puck,
This
did
is
you
entirely like
have
for
anything to
me,
add?
the entire topic is I have a lot to learn still, and I have a lot of people to talk to and keep on figuring stuff like this out. And I'm glad that I do have, the resources available to me and places I can, people I can talk to, like Phoebe over here, who has never been shy from conversation about anything that I've had to ask about. So I don't have. I haven't looked at this new release from the IOC, so I don't feel like I have a good, meaningful opinion to throw into the hat here, other than I definitely have some reading to do.
And Phoebe, you have another guest for your show.
I do.
Just saying. I don't know if you two have met, but we recently had Stephanie on SecX with Arden, and then Arden had Stephanie on Transatlantic last week, and you killed it. By the way, you killed it, girl. It was a great show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was really good. So I would actually be interested to hear your story on Phoebe's channel, for sure.
Anytime.
Maybe.
Thank you very much for calling, Stephanie. I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you. I see you on Discord a lot, but this is my first time really getting to talk to you. So, hi.
All right. Cool. Have a great night.
Stephanie, I will be in touch.
Thank you. We had a great docket of callers tonight. This was really awesome. All right. Well, Phoebe, really quick, we don't have a lot of time, so we better wrap this up. Tell us a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you.
Well, I run a weekly YouTube interview series on the wonderful platform that is YouTube. You can find that at youtube.com/Phoebe J Rose. There I am. And you can also find me on the Twitter. Again, Phoebe J Rose is my Twitter handle. And I usually find some area of the internet to go and shout at and go, excuse me, you're a complete idiot. And then I calm down and relax and have a wonderful conversation with guests on my show. Ironically, following on from Stephanie's caller this week, I am interviewing somebody called Natalie Washington, who is a British-based soccer player. She is not a goalkeeper, but she runs the organisation. Well, she doesn't run it. She works for the organisation Football v Transphobia and Football v Homophobia. So I think that ties in and dovetails very nicely with the last call that we had.
So what kind of advice would you give people who really want to share their stories?
If you want to share your story and you feel that you're ready to share your story, either pick up the microphone yourself if you can and look into a camera, or look into the microphone and hit record, or reach out to people like myself. I'm more than happy to have a diverse range of people, and I've always got spaces and I can always make spaces. I say I'm now on season 2 of Transition Stories. I say I did 12 episodes in season 1. Then I went away to Ireland and got engaged, and then came back and started season 2. And I'm looking for seasons 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and however long I can keep it going for.
Yeah, I hope it never ends. And we talk a lot about ACA shows, how we should be just the beginning of the conversation. We show you how to we present our models for how to have these good conversations. We can only have so many, right? We're only going to be able to reach so many people on these shows, but our audience is going to be able to reach many more. And there are some people that are going to resonate with you that won't resonate with us. So we hope that we're giving you a good model for how to have these good conversations. So I guess the other part is, what if somebody wants to encourage someone else to tell their story?
Do so kindly, do so gently, don't pressure the person, because at the end of the day, it's not your story, it's their story. And they have to be ready to share their story, and they have to be ready to gradually share their story, because if they're not ready, it may push them back and they may never share their story, or they may be traumatized by sharing their story too early. But just be kind, just be gentle, and get to know what the person's story is. And if you think that the person is ready, encourage them. But if you don't think the person is ready, respect that as well.
All right. Well, we're going to give you the last word for our audience, but first, Nate has some last minute announcements. So we'll go through that.
Yeah, I can definitely take us out. I think we've had Phoebe's links up here once more, but you know what? Let's get it up there one more time. Let's Phoebe Rose, everybody. Phoebe Rose, youtube.com/Phoebe J Rose. And also the Atheist Community of Austin is the purveyor of many fine shows available in audio format as well. So if you don't like to see my, didn't really have time to get ready before work hair, you don't have to. You can listen to audio only at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can listen to the Non Profetos, which Puck has brought up. You can listen to Truth Wanted. You can listen to Talk Heathen, AXP. All of our content is on there, folks, available for free, audio only. And if you can't get enough of Puck, if you can't get enough of Nate, can't get enough of Phoebe, or if you can't get enough of Christy, who has absconded the throne for this week only, you can join us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. It's run by fans, for fans. It is tiny.cc/FBSSG. That's Secular Sexuality Group. And if you'd like to continue this conversation after the show, I think we're all three of us going to be in the ACD Discord. Is that right? We're all going in there, guys?
Even if it is 2 in the morning for me, I'm still going to pop on over.
Phoebe, you are a trooper. So join us, tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And if you want some merch, folks, if you want to support the ACA and you want to do so publicly and you want to look fabulous doing it, you can buy some swag at tiny.cc/merch ACA. I myself have got this beautiful shirt here, as you can possibly see. Oh, yep, look. And I can tell you, look at Puck's got his. See, we're all sporting the gear today. And let me tell you, this is a comfortable shirt, fits well. I love it. And before we go, if we could see the fantastic individuals who fabricate this festival of fun, I want to see the crew. Katie's got her Truth Wanted shirt.
Very nice.
Hello, you lovely people, and thank you for actually doing the real work so that, folks like Puck and Phoebe and I can stand up here and vamp for an hour and a half. We appreciate all you do. But
we're just props that can move ourselves. They're the ones who actually put on the whole show. So
exactly. So Puck, I think there's a line you're legally obligated to say to take us out.
I am, but Phoebe, I just want to give you one last chance to get a last word. Anything we wanted to leave our audience with?
I have had an absolutely fantastic time today. I say this is the very first time I've ever taken live human beings on the end of a telephone to speak to, and I hope that the advice that I gave, information that I gave, I wouldn't really go as far to say that I was giving advice, was understandable and wonderful to people listening and the people who called in. But as I always say at the end of my shows, and as this is the end of a show that I'm on, you get one life. Make the best that you can out of the life that you have, because you don't get a second chance and you don't get a do-over. So you get one life and live the best life that you possibly can.
And to give the legally obligated line, in a few minutes, we're going to be showing up on Discord. You can ask us any questions we didn't get to, so please show up there. But we're going to take a little bit of break between now and then, which gives you a little bit of time to maybe give yourself a big old orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.